Around the 6th century BC, Buddhism was born in the Ganges River Valley of India. Over the next 2,500 years, every generation of Buddhists has inherited and shared Buddhism to help the religion eventually spread across the entire world. In the 3rd century BC, Buddhism was introduced into Sri Lanka, then on to Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Xishuangbanna in China's Yunnan province. Thus was the basis of Pali language Buddhism. By the 1st century AD, Buddhism arrived into central China, and subsequently on to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and beyond. Thus, Chinese language Buddhism emerged. In the 7th century AD, Buddhism came to the Tibetan region of China, and on to Mongolia, Russian Siberia, and beyond. Here, Tibetan language Buddhism took its form. In the 19th century AD, Buddhism arrived in Europe, North America, and Oceania. In the 20th century AD, Buddhism reached Africa and South America. Today, people of different races, languages, cultures, and nations can all share the glorious illumination and wisdom of Buddha's teachings. Throughout every great development in human history, all progress is inextricably linked to the profound adaptation among civilizations of different regions. Vital to this process is the mutual translation of their cultural classics. China has been the second native land of Buddhism. One could regard the whole history of Chinese Buddhism as the translation history of Buddhist classics. In 64 AD, Emperor Ming of the Eastern Han Dynasty dreamt of a golden man at night, which presaged the arrival of the Indian monks, Kashapa, Matanga, and Dharma Ratna 3 years later. Along with their white horses bearing sutras, they came to China to preach Buddha's teachings and translated the Sutra of 42 sections. This marks the beginning of Buddhism's spread in China. Later, An Shiku, Shi Xuan, Dharma Raksha, and Kumarachiva, the translator monks of India and Central Asia, braved great danger and hardship to travel to the distant Han region, which contributed greatly in establishing strong roots of Buddhism in China. They were not only translators of sutras, but also mentors for transmitting the Buddha Dharma. Great Master Kumarajiva, the most eminent translator in Buddhism before the Tang Dynasty, oversaw the facility for sutra translation with hundreds of translators so grandly. Before moving on to Nirvana, the Master vowed to prove the perfection of his sutra translations, that the back of his tongue would remain intact during his cremation. So thus, during the Master's cremation, the base of his tongue survived the flames perfectly to become a story for all ages. In the expanding influence of Buddhism, more and more Buddhist monks in central China generated a great craving for Buddha Dharma. Forebears such as Zhu Shixing from the Three Kingdoms period and Great Master Xuanzang and Tripitaka Master Yi Jing of the Tang Dynasty had crossed deserts and mountains without wavering at distance and danger for the pursuit of Buddha Dharma. This came to change the dominance of foreign translators in Buddhist translation history. By their complete devotion, they composed the songs of sincere praises. In the history of Chinese Buddhism and culture, Great Master Xuanzang, having a multitude of works to his credit, earned repute as one of our greatest sutra translators. With firm faith and strong perseverance, he traveled alone for 17 years. After a journey of more than 15,000 miles, passing through 110 nations, he returned to China with 657 records of Buddhist sutras. In the following 19 years, he translated both Mahayana and Hinayana sutras, totaling 1,335 volumes comprising 75 works. It was an unprecedented height in sutra translation. That ushered in a new era for Buddhist translations in China. The developments of Buddhism in China also brought great influence to surrounding nationalities and countries. By joint efforts of Chinese with foreign monks, China played a role in transferring Buddhism to the neighboring countries such as Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Of all the Chinese masters spreading the Dharma to other countries, Great Master Xuanzang had the most far-reaching impact. Over 12 years' time, from 742 to 753 AD, Master Xuanzang, leading his disciples, crossed the ocean in vain 5 times, trying to enter Japan. Yet after countless hardships, including falling blind, on the 6th attempt they finally succeeded in entering Japan. They brought advanced Chinese Buddhism, architecture, literature, medicine, and art to Japan. In honor of this event, to the history of Sino-Japanese interchanges through Buddhism, an immortalizing monument has been erected. After Great Master Xuanzang's efforts, Japan's great masters Sai Chu and Ku Kai traveled with government envoys to China and brought back a substantial amount of Buddhist scriptures, which greatly stimulated the spread of Buddhism in Japan. Before the Huichang calamity in the Tang Dynasty, numerous Buddhist scriptures were transferred, foreshadowing their return in years to come. In the 7th century, Buddhism was introduced to Tibet of China, gradually promoting the progress and development of the Tibetan people greatly. Translation of Buddhist scriptures into the Tibetan language lasted from the 7th century until the 13th century. This came to form the Tibetan Tripitaka, the Kangjur Canon, and the Denjur Canon. During the Northern Song Dynasty, translation of Buddhist scriptures among Han people witnessed a brief period of flourishing. Meanwhile, translation from Sanskrit into Tibetan, from Tibetan into Mongolian, and into Manchu Tripitaka was at its peak. Theravada Buddhism was introduced into Xishuangbanna during the 12th century. Over the following centuries, transliterated Pali versions of Tripitaka into the Dai language were gradually completed. During the last years of the Qing dynasty, China was plagued by domestic disturbance and foreign aggression. Large amounts of Buddhist scriptures were destroyed in war, and translation of Buddhist scriptures came to a halt. In 1866, the lay Buddhist Yang Wenhui founded Jinling Scriptural Press. Retrieving from Japan, Korea, and elsewhere the lost Buddhist works of the Sui and Tang dynasties, he laid the foundation for Buddhism's revival in modern China. In the early 20th century, as an outstanding representative for the revival of Buddhism in China, Great Master Taishu also brought Chinese Buddhism to the world. The master traveled through countries in Europe and America in an attempt to build an international Buddhist institute, calling for the establishment of Buddhist translation institutes for Chinese English, Chinese Japanese, Chinese Tibetan, and Pali languages, and cultivating sutra translation talent wholeheartedly. The effort of Great Master Taishu promoted the globalization of Chinese Buddhism. Today, the exchange between Eastern and Western civilizations is unprecedented. How will the ancient wisdom in Buddhism be made known and shared with broader masses? Today, numerous great masters are striving tirelessly towards this aim. Member of the Standing Committee of the CPPCC and Vice President of the Buddhist Association of China, Venerable Master Shui Cheng is one of these representatives. Under the vigorous support of Venerable Master Shui Cheng, Beijing Longchuan Monastery, since its reinstatement as a religious site in 2005, has been exploring how Buddhism should integrate itself with the society and the world. Led by the Master, both Chinese and foreign volunteers make concerted efforts in Buddhist translation. In 2008, the English version of the Voice of Longchuan website was launched. In 2011, the 8-language microblog was launched in Chinese, English, French, German, Russian, Japanese, Korean, and Spanish, as well as the full new Japanese version of Voice of Longchuan, and Longchuan Monastery's Translation Center was formally established. In 2012, the English edition of Venerable Master Shui Cheng's collection of Dharma Talks, Understanding Life, was published. After that, the 8-language monks microblog, Beijing Longchuan Monastery, 365 Days, the English and then Vietnamese versions of stories of Venerable Master Shui Chung, and the Japanese and Korean versions of Understanding Life were published in succession. In June 2012 and May 2013, Longchuan Monastery's Translation Center sent delegations subsequently to visit the United States and 7 European countries, embarking on a new journey of Chinese Buddhism reaching abroad. For Chinese Buddhism to benefit the world, the responsibility is heavy and the road long. For Chinese culture to illuminate the universe, the cause is sacred and solemn. The mission of our time calls for our brave undertaking. From here, now, we set sail.